Trump is making fairly efficient use of his out-of-court time when it comes to campaigning. I saw he did so again with a group of New Yorkers.
Yeah, he made a campaign stop this morning on Park Avenue in New York City and met with some construction workers. And I loved it. You know, it was just an impromptu thing to do. And this is what you've suggested all along, like campaign before, campaign after the trial. Meet the people of New York. So they, of course, embraced him, and it was cool to see. I loved it.
Well, so while Trump is meeting with rank and file construction workers, the big guy, Mr. 10%, President Biden, was speaking to the North American building trades, the chieftains of the trade unions. And, he rallied them as only Joe Biden can.
Imagine what we can do next. 4 more years. Pause.
4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years.
I mean, he read out loud the teleprompter instructions where in parentheses it says pause, and he said, pause. And you know what that reminds us of, Dan?
Well, that's going to do it for all of us here at Channel 4 News. You stay classy, San Diego. I'm Ron Burgundy.
Damn it! Who typed a question mark on the teleprompter? For the last time, anything you put on that prompter, Burgundy will read.
Hey. Biden went on after the 4 more years chanting died down to offer this.
And I'm Ron Burgundy. Go f*** yourself, San Diego.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, that's that. Biden and Trump on the trail and Trump on the trials. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Roger Kimball, who's the editor of New Criterion. Roger, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So you had a piece over at The Spectator about this trial in Manhattan in particular and what it signifies. We were just talking before you joined us a little bit about sort of the social compact breaking down between our ancestors and our progeny, and America being in this curious place where we, to borrow from Livy, we can neither tolerate our vices nor their cures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we're in a very strange situation now. You know, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, prohibits bills of attainder because the founders of this country understood that making a law that targets one individual or one group is a synonym for tyranny. But that's exactly what's happened in the case of Donald Trump. I mean, the entire force of the police power of the United States has been directed to take out this one person, and the case that's going on right now in New York is illustrates that as graphically as possible. If you ask someone what is the crime for which he is being tried, people will just start gibbering because there is no crime. And it's if you look at the what Alvin Bragg has done, he's taken a non-crime and elevated it into 34 felony counts. It's quite extraordinary what's happening now. It reminds you of a cross between Kafka and trials in the Soviet Union. You know, Beria, Stalin's head of the secret police and for Stalin, said, "Show me the man and I'll find you the crime." And that's exactly what's happened with Donald Trump.
Well, there's nothing illegal about paying someone for an NDA, non-disclosure agreement.
No. Well, apparently I haven't really looked into this, but I saw someplace yesterday that Joe Biden has NDAs with some 20 women. It would be interesting to look into that. It would not surprise me, but it's not a crime. That's the point. So they have taken this and elevated it into 34 felony counts. It's quite extraordinary.
I haven't heard it quite characterized this way, but I was sort of struck by a conversation that a friend of the show, Lionel Shriver, had with Brendan O'Neill over at Spike. Lionel Shriver, the great author. We need to talk about Kevin and others. Anyway, they were talking about social manias. Social manias. Obviously, COVID-19 comes to mind. Climate change, systemic racism, the non-existent trans genocide that is alleged. And Lionel Shriver said this about manias and how they subside. She said, "My sense is they die very quietly, slowly, and tacitly. That is, they die when people stop talking about them. They do not die because people in power reverse their positions in public. And regardless of what the particular mania was, you'll never hear any apologies or recognition from the people who went nuts. They'll never disavow their past beliefs or actions. Very few will ever be held to account either. The people who brought in lockdowns are never going to pay a price. Those who do acknowledge their faults, such as the CDC in the U.S., will only do so in a tiny, quiet way. But you'll never see a CDC official admit the same things in public. The authorities will never recognize that they were caught up in hysteria and they were wrong. And then the people who went along with it just want to change the subject after people stop talking about it and are ready to prepare themselves for the next mania." And just that description, I think, is explains very nicely or describes very nicely what has happened with some of the manias I mentioned. And this all leads to my question: is Trump one of those manias?
Well, yes. This whole situation with Trump reminds me a little bit of the title of a book by Charles Mackay called "Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds," in which he goes through various manias, as you put it. The craze for tulip bulbs in Holland at one point, where a single bulb could cost more than your house, and then it grew and it grew and it grew, and then it just suddenly collapsed. I've never been able quite to get to the bottom of the Trump mania. The people who hate him. It's very strange. Is it aesthetic? No, maybe partly. It can't really be ideological because if you look back on his first term, it was extraordinarily successful. I think of some of my friends or former friends who are on the never Trump right, and I want to ask them, well, what is it that you dislike about what he's done? Is it the fact that he made the country energy independent, that he had a sealed southern border, that he was able to get through a massive tax cut that increased tax receipts by 48% and helped 65% of taxpayers by paying lower taxes? Is it the fact that he was the best friend Israel's ever had, that he moved our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem when people told him it couldn't be done? The list goes on and on and on. What he did for the regulatory environment and so on. All these are all things that mainstream conservatives should like. So, what is it that they hate about him? I don't really have the answer, but I think it is irrational. And then you go on to the left. Why does the left hate him the way they do? They love Donald Trump until he came down the escalator in 2016 to announce his candidacy. Then they just couldn't abide him. It has something to do, I believe, with the strange alchemy of our political life, where people keep talking about our democracy. We have to say our democracy and so on. But we are not a democracy anymore. We are an oligarchy ruled by a tiny elite, and it's that tiny elite that Trump challenges, and people hate him for it.
Well, to me, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of understanding why it's different. I mean, the left called George W. Bush Hitler and Stalin, and I mean they call every Republican Hitler and Stalin. They make Mitt Romney was Hitler and Stalin, right?
I know,
So,
I love that. Yes, at least it's Ronald Reagan. Every Republican has been literally Hitler. You can go back and look it up. It's quite true.
Yeah,
so
but here's the difference.
Trump is special. Yeah.
Yeah, but the difference is, and this is where I think the over the top animus comes from, and the mania really. And they recognize exactly what Liner Shriver is saying. There's no such thing as being over the top. We can hyperbolize this beyond all recognition because we'll never have a price to pay for it, whether we're in the justice system or we're in the public health sphere or the corporate America. We'll never ever pay a price. So let's make him as toxic as possible, because the one crime that Trump has committed, and I would keep talking about this, he will not defer. And they're used to Republicans. They're accustomed to Republicans like a Romney or a W for the most part, the country club set, the compassionate conservative set that will defer to them once challenged, that you're supposed to back down. You're supposed to do bipartisan deals with Chuck Schumer. You're supposed to facilitate a slower advance of our flag. We understand you have to slow it down to keep up appearances, but as long as you're still advancing our flag, even if it's at a slower pace than we would, that's what you're supposed to do as a Republican. And Trump comes over the top, and he comes really over the top. He'll punch down sometimes when he shouldn't, but everything is, you challenge me and I will challenge you 100 times over. And that's what they're not used to. That's what they can't abide.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's, what is the crime that Trump committed? It's having been elected and challenging this consensus. You're quite right to mention, Romney and Bush and so on. We don't live in a two-party system. We live in a one-and-a-half-party system. So the regime party is the left-wing Democratic Party. It's not, it's not the Democrats of old. It is a new compact that's represented by people like Chuck Schumer, by Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi. It's very left wing, and they control the government. Washington is ruling the country as a party state. So what I mean is that if we're going to take the country back, we are going to have to downgrade the place of Washington in the metabolism of our political life. Jefferson wanted the capital to move from New York to the swamp where it is now, partly because it would be closer to Virginia, but also because he thought of it as neutral ground. But it's not neutral ground anymore, if it ever was. It is totally controlled by a left-wing consensus of this elite. These country club elites that you referred to, and if we cannot challenge that, we're going to lose the country, and we're right. I would say we're on the threshold of losing the country right now. If this campaign against the former president of the United States is allowed to go forward and to destroy him, which is possible, that's it. It will be, Christopher Wray's FBI dawn raids against people who are, dissident school board members or pro-life activists or people who have the wrong opinions. What happened to this eminent lawyer and constitutional scholar, John Eastman? What is his tort? Well, he gave legal advice to Donald Trump. He said, if you want to challenge the 2020 election, here are several different ways in which you could do it. He, as a lawyer, gave the best advice he could to Donald Trump about possible responses to the 2020 election and Trump's apparent defeat. For that, he's just been disbarred. He may be indicted. His banks, the companies in which he did his business as a lawyer. They have just canceled his account, so he now has to find other banks. It's really quite extraordinary the way the regime will pick individuals that dissent from the ruling consensus and destroy them.
There's no question. By the way, Eastman has been indicted. He was indicted in Arizona yesterday.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah.
Yesterday? Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, Eastman's account at USAA too, for the military, right?
Oh, is that right? Okay.
His account. His account. I mean, you mentioned his banking accounts being.
The
USAA that serves veterans.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's as I'm fond of saying, things are always worse than they seem. I mean,
yes, indeed. Roger Kimball, editor of New Criterion. Thanks so much for joining us as always. Appreciate it, Roger.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Since Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, Illinois has become an abortion epicenter. As states across the country pass laws that restrict or ban abortion,